Hey folks, nice to see so many new and familiar faces here. This is low res thesis talk number 17 out of 412. Ron Sheng's thesis project, Paper Sun's Passage, utilizes virtual reality technology to place viewers in a simulacrum of a cell with would-be Chinese immigrants detained upon reaching America at the dawn of the 20th century. When xenophobic legislation targeted these would-be guest workers, often providing a dismal finale to a journey already rife with hardship and exploitation. If Ron's subject seems all too timely, I'd argue that for many of us, the current attack on immigrants feels so dumb and insurmountable that we are lulled into a stupor of inaction at the very time we need to support our friends and neighbors, whose presence enriches our communities, whose labor and intellectual contributions have made this nation the wealthiest and most powerful on the planet. In his thesis paper, Ron braced the historical narrative with recollections of his own immigration story. Immigrating and seeking asylum in the US, a vivid reminder of the way history, if it does not repeat itself, at least rhymes. It's a moving account of the uncertainty, bureaucratic tedium that impacts immigrants' lives across US history. Ron has been balancing his role as video and sound manager with the demands of the low-res program, supporting his fellow students with generosity and expertise up on the 6th floor, where we keep an army of robots. I'm sure it'll be a relief to do a few less things, but this project makes me expect that Ron will have no shortage of invitations for new works to make in the near future. Please welcome Ron Sheng.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ryan. I'm very proud of my robot army. Thank you, everyone, for coming to my thesis talk. If you haven't tried my VR work, there's still time. It will, stay there until Friday next week. So take your time, but it will be great if you can actually go there to experience it, because this talk cannot present you the actual experience, so you have to really put it out to give it a try. There's a lot to be talked about, so let's just get going. What I created is a VR interactive experience, reimagining a Chinese paper sun detained in Portland, 1903. This installation serves as a portal, an invitation to step inside history's uncomfortable spaces and gather what fragments remain. That is my artist statement, a short version. But on a personal level, I see this as a creative narration of two journeys, more than 100 years apart. One is about a paper sun, another is about myself. We will talk about the paper sun for sure, but I find it will be useful if we talk about myself a little bit, so bear with me. A quick look back on my journey. In the year 2015, my family, moved to Portland. I was an international student here to finish my higher education with the hope to be one of the first generation immigrants. After many struggle, many stories, in 2018, I graduated from PNC and made an arts department major. I got my MFA degree here. And I consider myself very lucky because only after a couple months graduated, I got a job at PNC Tech Support as an assistant. That's really my first job in the US because as an international student, I cannot legally work in this country before that. You can imagine how much financial stressful that is. And another great milestone follow-up is in 2019, our family's immigrant status has been secured, which means I can continue stay in this country, work legally in this country. And then later that year, August 2019, I got myself into a local studio, become a full-time stop motion animator. I love that job. It's so enjoyable. You can see how I'm so proud with the set and all the little action figures. I imagine I'm gonna do that for many years. But no, because the pandemic was here. For the first time of my life, I got laid off. And I become a freelance animator, literally taking whatever freelance job I could find to support my family. But not entirely horrible. One good thing, well, probably the best thing during the pandemic, my family applied and we got our green cards. So we no longer have to worry about, being kicked out from this country. Well, at least at that time. Later, after the pandemic and after Willamette and PNC merged, I came back to PNCA, become a support specialist, served for, guess what? Animated art student, the department where I graduated from. Again, I love that job. You can tell that because I'm still doing it. And you know the rest of the story. 2023, I enrolled into the low residency MFA in visual studies, and I'm now doing my thesis talk. Yes, my thesis talk. We will talk about that. My thesis, yeah. The origin of my thesis can be drawn back to 2023. At the time, I got the privilege to work with a group of super talented artists and technologists, researchers. We worked together, put up this AR, stand for Augmented Reality. This project is called X-Archive, Histories and Regions of Block 14 at Langford Cemetery. Langford is a local cemetery in southeast Poland. And it's not far from here. And within the cemetery, there's one block called Block 14. It used to bury a lot of Chinese immigrants. Actually, that's pretty much the only place Chinese immigrants will be buried back in time. If you want to learn more about this, or if you're interested to learn more about AR, feel free to Google. You can check. You can Google SETI Portland. So there are introduction on their website. There's more information there. What's important is it's not really the first time I heard the term paper sun, because I know there's many paper sun being buried in that place, in that cemetery. It's not the first time I heard this term, but it's the first time I really dig deep and learn more about those paper sun stories. So at one time, Portland had the second largest Chinatown in the US, and almost 10% of our population was Chinese before racist exclusion laws. So what is this racist exclusion laws? Okay, the notorious Chinese Exclusion Act from 1882 to 1943. The first major US law to prevent all members of a specific national group from immigrating, shaped this country's race-based immigration policy in many ways. This is what created paper sons. If you're not familiar, I can talk a little bit more about it. So paper sun is basically using a loophole in the Exclusion Act, because there are exceptions, which means if you are direct relative of already here, some US citizens already here, you can be allowed to enter the US. That's why there are Chinese immigrant family already become US citizen here. They provide this so-called paper to whoever want to come over from China all the way to here for whatever reason, mostly for better life, better opportunities. They won't pay a big amount of money. to buy this paper. What's in this paper is very detailed information about this so-called paper family. And all the information they're gonna need to memorize, because once this person come from China, arrive here, because she's Chinese, you immediately be put into detention facility. They will need to get through a series of interrogation to prove themselves actually are son of a US citizen here in Poland. This is why it's important to remember all those details, informations on the purchased paper. So you see, that's where the paper son, the name came from. Because the paper son and their paper families only exist on paper. That's where the term paper son came from. And I learned a lot of things from this book, Sweet Cake, Long Journey, such a wonderful book, The Chinatowns of Portland, Oregon. The author, Dr. Mary Rose Wang, who is teaching in Seattle University. Interestingly, Dr. Wang herself is a daughter of a paper son. So her father is actually a paper son, and she only learned that after her father passed away, and she even put her personal story into the introduction chapter of the book. It's very touching. But more importantly, there is a dedicated chapter in the book all about how paper sons use whatever creative ways to land in Portland doing the distributed after Europe. Yeah, with all these things I learned from the history, I decided to make my proposal in January 2025. I proposed to create, this is exactly what I said in my proposal on interactive VR installation. Why VR? Because I really believe the immersive VR technology provided can be really great for this topic, this concept, to depict this kind of experience for people to actually experiencing something from the past. However, after the proposal, I find myself kind of stuck for quite a few weeks because these challenges. The first thing is, sure, yeah, I propose, I get passed, but how exactly am I gonna use VR to depict such experience? VR is still considered a very new technology, relatively new technology. More importantly, who is this paper son in my work? I need a name, a real case. I definitely won't just make up some name or story. That's not something I will do. How can I get a case that I want? Should I go back to those archives, read them one by one, get through them one by one? Or should I interview someone either who was a paper son, who is a paper son, or who, as relative of a paper son? But both of those gonna take a lot of time. After a while, I realize I am not a historian. I'm a visual artist. I should focus on whatever I do the best, whatever I'm good at. It is okay if I just take a case from someone's already, exist research and use that in my project. It does not have to be 100% original. So with that thinking, the answer is right in front of me. There's Chinese old saying, a book holds a house of gold. It's better than that. Also, from this book, Mary Rose Wang's book, she included a very interesting case about a paper son whose name is Liang Jifu. This case is very interesting in many ways because it has a lot of twists, drama, turnarounds. I'll tell you the story. I'm trying to be concise and quick, but basically, Jifu was 15 years old, came to Portland And of course, she's a paper son, she's trying to get through the interrogation. However, the interrogation wasn't, went very well. When she's not performed well, let's say that. And the investigator of this case is not convinced about his, identity. At that time, his paper family, like I already mentioned, the family here who's supposed to be his family, they're trying to help him. The way they help is they wrote down a letter, of course, in Chinese, the one we can see here, and they tuck it into a very small piece and hide into a sweet cake, baked cake, with other cakes put into a brown bag, send it to the detention cell, the detention facility as a gift for the detainee. However, twist here is the investigator already suspected, so the investigator of this case intercepted this package. And he opened those, break out those cake one by one and found the coaching letter. This is really bad because that's a hard evidence, isn't it? Everybody was saying, oh, this poor boy is done because he's definitely gonna be deported back to China. And then comes to another twist. His paper father hired a very experienced immigrant attorney, a lawyer. And this guy is really good. He took this case to a hearing and argue there's wrongdoing, they're unfair, or like some not really legal investigating, doing the process of the interrogation. So eventually, the judge granted entrance for Jifu as a son of a US citizen. So it's a happy ending. And even I even checked that the court record didn't even mention exactly why the judge makes that decision, but it is what it is. And we don't know after that what happened or what the rest of the life of Jifu was. We don't know that. It's simply nowhere to be found. But I like that story, and I'm gonna use it. So right after that decision, I fire up my research engine, follow the lead from the book. I went to the National Archives catalog website. I found an entire collection, a complete case file of Jifu. It has digital scans of many documents, the interrogation record, the actual coaching letter, scan of the actual coaching letter. Even if you see on the upper right corner, that's the front bag used to hold those tapes where the coaching letter hidden. Yeah, I use that as a visual reference for my project. Speak about visual reference, I need a lot of that because we're talking about 1903, and most likely Jifu was detained in the Portland City Jail because that city jail was partially used as detention facility. However, it proved to be very hard to find almost any visual material like photos back in the old time. With the help of PNC librarian and staff from Oregon Historical Society, and we managed to find a few photos like these two. You can see the exterior, the internal, the interior, the room, the bunk beds, but that's not enough. So I turned to another resource, where is the Angel Island Immigration Station website. Angel Island Immigration Station was another huge detention facility during the same era. It was outside of San Francisco. And nowadays it's been turned into a museum that displays a lot of, from the old time, how immigrants will stay in there, how their life would be in a detention cell. And I didn't went there to visit, but just from the website is already very helpful. I found all these photos from their static display, how are those like what kind of belongings those immigrants will take with them, how their life looks like those hanging clothes inside the detention cell. And I use a lot of those eventually in my project. Besides all these, another thing's happening, which is the thesis writing. The dilemma I was facing, because this is back to February to March. What I'm facing is I need to write about something I haven't created yet. How can I do that? I'm glad I talked to Ryan and of course Jules, my instructor for thesis writing, and they're very helpful. Ryan said, "Why don't you write something abstracted or something creative?" So I think about it because I myself, as a Chinese immigrant, I have a long journey myself to stay here. What if I compare or like put my story and G-Folk's story together? So I decided I wrote two separate stories. One about G4 based on whatever I learned from all the documents, from all my research. Of course, there are many gaps because we don't know what we don't know. I use what I learned from other paper science cases and with logical assumption to fill in the gap with, of course, my imagination of what would happen back then. So it's half based on history, half fictional. So that's G-Folk's story. And the other story entirely about myself, about my family's journey. And then I literally wrote the two stories separate and then merge them, intertwine them together. So become this little booklet. I must say I'm pretty proud about what I did. So if you're interested, feel free to go there, grab a copy, or you can download a digital copy from the QR code. I'll show the QR code later if you're interested. Now, it was April. I finally starting to work on the VR build. I made my first mockup room in April, and I'm trying to find my creative narrations through this medium. One thing I find very interesting is play with the scale. I did that before in other of my works. The reason first is much easier if you have a digital room. You want to scale everything up compared to having a physical installation. It's really easy. Also, the scale. What I did with the first mockup is I made the entire room, everything in it, so large, scale up like 6-8 times, much larger. And the viewer will just wander in this big room. This is a way to emphasize the unequal power structure every immigrant facing. Like even nowadays, still the fact, because the authority can easily decide your future. Another thing is based on the concept of the physical body difference. I'm Asian. I'm always consider myself pretty short. So imagine those Chinese immigrants when they arrived here, facing the strange place, strange people, everything is slightly larger than them, taller than them. I use this concept to emphasize the physical difference of the situation they're facing, the surrounding they're facing. Of course, I make it really, really exaggerated. Another challenging I was facing during the creating is it's really hard to tell how long it's gonna take. Everyone I talk to around me, nobody can really tell me how long it will take for me to. It's my first time doing this. I don't know. So my mentor Teresa was very supportive. Suggested me to create this is called flowchart. A flowchart usually used in gaming development to show the process, the steps of a player takes, but it works here too. So I made this flowchart and I found someone, a friend in SETI. His name is Martin Smith. because Martin has the real world industry experience of creating VR work. So I bring this to him, talk to him about what I'm trying to do. And Martin, after listening, stared at me, said, Ran, if I'm doing this, I need a full-time team working 9 months to get it done. What do you have? How much time you have? I was like, I have myself. I do have a full-time job, but definitely not this. And I have less than 3 months. So I starting to think, shit, am I in big trouble? Am I giving me a huge nightmare? So I'm starting to think maybe I should downscale everything, make it simplify. But eventually I was decided I'm gonna just push it through. Let's see how much I can do in 3 months. So one thing I can do to simplify and quicken the process is finding prefabricated assets for the project. Luckily, I found a great resource, a Chinese website provide a lot of these. Even I need to pay, but it's very cheap. So I download many of those assets I can directly use or with slightly modification. It still takes some time, but save me compared to build everything by myself, save me a huge amount of time. And finally, with all the resources, with all the assets, I'm starting to visualizing the experience in Unity, the program I choose. My concept is this gonna be like a twilight zone, where fact and fiction merge together. It has both realism and surrealism together. I want to create this subtle sense of alienation, unwelcoming, and uncomfortable, because that's how you feel when you in that kind of space. And I make a very intention choice. You already heard I talk about the scale, but beyond that, I realized I can do more than that with scale. And what I did is I make everything with the room itself either super extremely stretched, scaled up, or deformed, twisted, become a weird shape, something, but not, it's weird. It feels off. It feels like something wrong with it, but not to the level that out of nowhere. So yeah, that's what I learned from this project, that you don't have to push everything so extreme to get the effect. You only need to do so much to give your audience this kind of feeling. It's also the, if you've been into the VR, you see the very extremely tall ceiling, the vast space. That's partially from my own phobia. I have this so-called megalophobia. It's a fear of huge structure, huge space. It's like the room is gonna crush me, some kind of phobia like that. So that's also a thing I want my audience to notice. So that's why I want to give them some hint. I put some bunk bed hanging in the air. So when they look up, it emphasizes because if there's nothing there, it's kind of hard to, because there's no reference, you kind of hard to tell how far that thing is. More about that, I'm trying to figure out my ways of creating narration. Because the entire project is based on reality, but it should be on reality. This is when Ryan and I talked, he called this collaborative storytelling, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do. It's like, I'm gonna hand you a handful of puzzle pieces. I'm not gonna tell you what it is. You need to start to play with them and put them together. And turn out it's not even complete. There are many empty spaces, blanks. If you want to learn the whole picture, you also need to put on your own effort to find out what's behind it. So that's the concept of my creative narration behind this project. All right, it's already May. I finally have enough for a prototype test. So I participate this Thesis group show called Constellations Uncertainty in Lawyer Center. It's the first time I put my VR work into a public facing test. And I learned so much. I'm so glad I did this. I learned so much from the feedback from the real world running of a VR, like what need to be done for the next stage. Because at that time, the experience is still using this so-called teleport. Like you holding the controller, you press a button, you will immediately be transported into the location you're pointing to. That's not exactly what I want. Also, the controller itself is, problematic. So I set some goals for the next stage, basically to design a better experience. The first thing is the immersive. I want the whole thing to be immersive and intuitive. So I came up with the idea to make my VR room automatically align with the physical exhibition space. Like you don't need to worry where you are as long as you're inside the VR zone. You just put on the headset, you're there. You don't have to start particularly from a spot, designated spot. Also, I hate controller. I want to ditch the controller. I don't want the controllers to keep reminding my audience, you're using VR, right? This thing. I want my audience to use their own hand. And the hand tracking technology is already there. Just, well, I think it will work. I just need to give it a try. It turned out to be a long wrestling with technology and AI. I need to work with AI to save time because the deadline is really tight. Because I myself I don't know how to programming and coding. I don't have time to learn all this. So I use AI to help me to generate the script that many function you need to have a script to run in the Unity to make that function happen. It's a really love and hate relationship. AI is great. It's really helpful, and it can write the code, write the script for you. But it never worked at the first time because AI can't test the script itself. I need to test the script and tell what happened, what I observed with the problematic. We're trying to troubleshooting why the script doesn't work, say why the hand is not in tracking, or why it doesn't work. This can take a long time. And the most horrible part of this is I don't know how long it's gonna take. Again, the uncertainty is really stressing me out. I don't know if it's gonna work in an hour or a day or a week. Or even if it will actually work, I don't know. Because there's nobody out there can help me on this. This is entirely my own choice to do this. Yeah, but I really just pushed through. The turnout is take me 7 days, a whole week to get the space auto alignment work. Another 3 full days to get the hand tracking work. But eventually it worked.
Yes.
So I'm very proud of that. Yeah. After a lot of tears and stress, of course. 1 week before the exhibition opening, there's still a big component is missing, which is the sound. Sound is really important in any immersive work. So I spent the last week focused on how to find the right sounds for to recreate whether from like indoor or outdoor sounds from Poland in 1903. I'm glad I did research early. I already have a list that what sound I want to have to include in my VR. And I found everything on freesound.org. That's where you found them. It's really great resource. And I very carefully to place them in different position, in different location inside the room. And more importantly, I make them play randomly. So it's not like, oh, you go there or touch something, it start playing. It's not that. It's totally random. The viewer wandering around the room at different location, different space of the room, they will hear different things and totally happen in random order. It creates this kind of feelings like, because no one else is there. When you're there, you're the only person and you don't see any other people, but you hear some from people, from squeaking noise from the bed. It's like whispers from the past, like ghost whispers. Yeah, and I think that's really hugely improved the experience of this VR room. So with all the talking, I think it should be a good idea to show you a video of the it's basically a screen recording of myself in the room. But before I play this, I do want to make sure you understand it's totally different from seeing this compared to actually put it on. It's very different. Also, you see, I put it rather small instead of the entire screen because, funny enough, if you put on the VR, it's very unlikely you will get any like motion sickness because your body is moving. It's very impressive. But watch this can cause you sickness. So if you're starting to find yourself, feel free to stop watching it. And we're not gonna spend a long time on this. It's a little bit. I'm gonna skip to where I'm gonna skip the intro part. So that's the room. Keep in mind, all those documents you see there are all from GFO's real case, those case files from the case files. And you can literally read them if you want inside the VR, if you hold them close, like this. All right, I'm gonna just stop here because I really believe the better way is to actually experience it. And I'm gonna talk about maybe a little bit debrief, review, and think about the future. Because if you compare the final work, the final version with the one I proposed, the biggest difference here is it's much less gaming-like. Because when I'm proposing it, I'm thinking, making more like a puzzle game kind of experience. You try to find your way out. But I'm actually happy with the final work because I realized if I make it too much gamified, it kind of lost the respect of this kind of trauma experience. It might be a better approach if I want, introduce this to more like younger generation. But honestly, I like the version I currently have instead of make it too much like a game. Well, if you ask me what I would do differently in the future, if I continue working on this, or if I go back to time, I'm definitely gonna find someone or hire someone who's good at programming to help me. So I can more focus on the art perspective. For the future of this project, I would love to show this in a museum setting or even in some galleries. I really believe Portland Chinatown Museum will be a great place to display this. I will be in contact with someone in the future. And before I end my presentation, I want to say a lot of express my appreciation to many people, starting from SETI, thanks to Natalie, Roberta, Martin, TJ, because they inspired me and encouraged me to create this project. Thanks to PNC Library, Oregon Historical Society, thanks to many of my PNC supporters, start from Yin Jin Ko, my boss star, along with Jay, Kate, Megan, Patrick, and many other people, of course. Thanks to PNC exhibition team and tech team. Thanks to low residency visual study parents, Ryan and Aaron, and all the faculty members. Of course, thanks to my mentors, Teresa and Komi. I enjoy every single conversation we had, and thank you for being so supportive to me. And of course, next will be my entire cohort. I love every one of you. You're my art family. Thank you guys. And thanks to my friend Ron and Turquoise, especially Turquoise, who passed away a week before the exhibition opening. I know she's in a better place, and I know she will be very proud to see what I've done. Last but definitely not least, thanks to my family. I cannot imagine myself standing right here, right now, without their entirely fully support and trust. If I accidentally forget someone, thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for. So we have a few minutes for questions from the audience. If you haven't been to a low-res thesis talk lately, it's just like a normal artist talk where normal people can ask normal questions. Abnormal people can also ask normal questions. In the sense that we do have a faculty panel, but we do the defense portion after the questions are over. So I'll bring you the mic, and that way our screening audience can hear your question. Also, screening audience, you're welcome to put questions in the chat, and time permitting, we will read those to Ron as well.
Well done, Ron.
Thank
That
you.
was awesome. I'm interested in knowing how your perspective on your experience coming here changed throughout this process and this alternating writing of historical fiction and your own story.
That's a really good question, because this thesis project provide me an opportunity to really look back at my own experience. Because I'll be honest, my family and our experience is much less traumatic compared to what what other Chinese people been through 100 years ago. But you still see similarities in there. There's still this uncertainty, this unequal power structure you're facing, the authority you're facing, that one person's decision can affect your entire family's future. It's gonna be very, very different if the person make a different decision. So yeah, I'm glad I did this, and I'm glad I wrote my thesis paper the way I did. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. That was impressive. I learned so much that I don't know anything about, so thank you for that. My question is similar in that you talked about their journey in your research, and you talked about how that had great impact in making you think about your own journey. And with the state of with the current state, is it something that you might perhaps explore, for example, doing a comparison, a VR experience of what it takes today to transition and experience using modern amenity versus maybe somebody in like Guantanamo or some of the other places that people experience to kind of get us inside the mindset. So this could be like a really large project. I'm just thinking if you thought about perhaps expanding it beyond just this particular time period and experience.
Yeah, that's a great thinking because I had different thoughts and thinkings about the future of this project because I can potentially expand it. And with what you said is another approach. Like, what if I find another story relatively recent and parallel with what happened in the past? That would be also, but I'm gonna need more time and resources, maybe a team to get it done. But I'll keep thinking about that. Thank you, Zach.
Ron, I'm curious about the impulse to design into your own phobias, because it seems like it's one thing to make a series of decisions to disorient and like uproot and intimidate your viewers in a general sense, but to think of yourself as the primary viewer and to make a series of decisions that makes you even less comfortable. Why was that important to this project?
Because this is like a subtle balance I'm trying to create. I don't want this to be a horror game. It's not. But I want people to wondering when they're in the virtual detention cell, why is this place look like this? Why there are bunk bed in here? What does that mean? And I want people to think when you actually in that space, you have the opportunity, you can get up there anytime. For the person back in the story, into the history, they couldn't. They need to stay there facing the, again, uncertainty. They don't know how long it takes. And I want to use these elements, whether visual or sound elements, to make them feel uncomfortable, but not in a very invasive, horrible way, like jump scare, if you want. But yeah, it's trying to make that subtle balance. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. I was curious about if there was some work or a specific piece you had done in second or first year of the program, or even further back in your process, that you see as like a real precursor to this.
I'm trying to think, because some of you might remember last summer I created this huge projection piece, multi-channel, multimedia projection piece. That's my great example of working with scales, because scale in that piece is also a metaphor of the power structure. When you are someone on the street protesting and fighting to the authority, when they have guns, tanks, armies. So yeah, that's something that may relate to my previous work, the play with the scale, the dimensions. Yeah. I think Laura was already.
Aaron, I'm wondering about, I feel like your ideal audience would go through this and might feel a lot of emotion and empathy. I'm wondering what you want them to do afterwards, if there's a call to action or something that you want them to.
Yes, I wouldn't say there's a call to action, but I want my audience, whether they already know about this or not, generally speak, Chinese exclusion law, the paper science. I want them to feel curious about this. That's why I'm not trying to answer all the questions. I'm not here to educate everyone. That's not the biggest purpose for this. I'm trying to make everyone curious. Why is this? What happened? What happened during that time? Why is this? What is paper sun? I want them to wondering and to find the answer. The answer is right out there. You just Google it. It's that fast. We're in this, internet information age. So that's my thought. Thank you.
Hi, Ron. I know you have so little time to get this project together, and I'm wondering if you probably have read about Angel Island and how a lot of the stories of the occupant was actually carved into the wall in poetry forms.
Yes.
So and I was wondering if you had more time, would you consider that as part of your textures and layers of depth and how people express themselves in those times in terms of carving words so that history runs to the wall, and how that another layer of your thinking.
Of course, I do aware of those poems on the wall in Angel Island. It's simply because I'm based in Portland, so I choose to focus more on what happened here. But yeah, I do learn about many things. There actually, even in the from the PNC library, there's this picture book for about paper sun. This is also about someone who came to the US very early through Angel Island. And well, there's many stories behind it. So there are people staying there for very long, and they crave Chinese poems onto the wooden wall inside the detention cell. And some of them you can, if you go there, I'm planning to actually visit Angel Island in future to actually see them. There are even translation for those poems. It's really interesting. So yes, I will definitely interested to maybe do more with that in future. Thank you, Coach.
I love the artifacts that we saw that were from the case, and especially the handwritten letter that had been baked into the sweet cake.
Yes.
And do they still have that letter? And then I wondered how big it was, and did you try baking some letter into a sweet cake?
Why would I do that? I believe because the digital file I download is a scan, but I believe it's relative. It's on a very thin rice paper, common, letter paper back in the time. But the thing is, I might forgot to mention this, but these kind of, sneaking information into the detention facilities quite common back then, because that's how they help the papers. Sometimes when they couldn't remember exactly all the things, or something changed, they need to adjust their answer or things like that. So yeah, it's fascinating to see those. I think maybe one day I'll go to Seattle. Those case files are currently in Seattle, and maybe one day I'll go there and actually hold them. Thank you.
Folks, we're gonna have to leave it there so we have time to panel, but Ron's gonna hang on and answer your questions face to face, and thank you so much for attending. Come back at 4:30 for food stuff.